I still can't reach Mr. Armin. The engagement party was starting in 10 minutes, and the male lead of the engagement was still unreachable. I looked at myself in the mirror, dressed in a gorgeous gown, and brushed a few stray hairs aside. My hand gripped the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white, but my face still wore a calm expression. You go out first. I'll call him. I sent the assistant and makeup artist out immediately and dialed Armin's number. Armin and I had grown up together, both carrying the heavy burden of our families. We knew what was appropriate and what wasn't. Today was an important day for both our families, a marriage alliance, and no matter how urgent things were, he shouldn't be ignoring my calls. But the phone rang for a long time without anyone answering. The beeping sound echoed in my ear, and I felt my heart sink. A bad feeling settled in. Could Armin be planning to back out of the engagement? An alliance wasn't a small matter, it impacted the reputation of both companies and the direction of their stocks. I called him more than a dozen times, but still, no answer. The engagement party was about to start. I couldn't just sit there and let this ruin everything. Just as I was about to tell my assistant to postpone the engagement, my phone rang. Patricia, I'm at the hospital right now. I might not be able to make it to the engagement today. The first words out of Armin's mouth made my heart drop. I clenched my hand around the phone, my voice anxious. What do you mean, the hospital? What happened to you? It's okay, we can delay the engagement, we can do it once you're better. Armin paused before speaking again. It's not me. Sarah fell down the stairs at the old house. The baby she's carrying might not make it. She's at the hospital, still unconscious. You know how it is, she's just been deceived by a man. She really needs someone now. Dad's busy with the engagement, so as her brother-in-law, it's natural for me to be there for her. I froze, my expression turning cold as I questioned him. What? Is the baby in her womb yours? You're acting so desperate for her? Armin, today is our engagement day, and you're abandoning me for an illegitimate daughter. What about our family's dignity? He was speechless for a moment, then rebuked me sharply. Is a family's dignity worth more than a human life? In your eyes, is life less important than reputation? Whatever she is, she's still your sister. Can you stop being unreasonable? This is a human life at stake. His words struck me like a slap. I almost laughed out of anger. This engagement wasn't something I begged for. Armin had barely started dating me when he pitifully said, Patricia, you have so many men around you. I'm afraid you'll leave me any day. Can we get engaged first? For me, love meant marriage, and the family union would bring growth for both companies. He felt insecure, so I gave him security. I planned the entire engagement myself. Armin still hadn't gotten control of his family's company and was busy battling with those illegitimate children. He didn't have time to help me with the details. He just gave me some money and told me to pick the plan I liked. I worked all day running the company, and at night, I was still managing the engagement. I never once complained about his absence. But now, for an illegitimate daughter, he was abandoning me. Wasn't this a slap in my face? He fought tooth and nail with the illegitimate children in his family, and he knew Sarah and her mother had indirectly caused my mother's death. Yet he still thought I was being too harsh on Sarah. Please, it was already a huge mercy that I hadn't kicked her out. I'll ask you one more time. You're really choosing Sarah over me, aren't you, Armin? You're going too far. This isn't about grudges, this is a human life. I can't just ignore it. I took a deep breath, trying to swallow the bitterness inside, and forced myself to stay composed. Fine. Whatever. Think about it carefully, Patricia. Before I could reply, the call ended. I looked up at the mirror, noticing for the first time that my eyes had reddened. I tried to hold back the tears threatening to spill. It would be a lie to say I had no feelings for Armin. This engagement was my way of showing him how I felt, yet he had just turned the love I offered into nothing. I pushed down the ache in my chest, reminding myself that I still had guests to face. Isn't this Miss Patricia, the one about to get engaged? Why are you alone here? Did the groom run off? Christian appeared at the door of the makeup room, looking at me with a sly grin. My bitterness was momentarily interrupted. I could be weak anywhere, but never in front of my nemesis, Christian. He leaned casually against the doorframe, looking at me with cold, unrelenting eyes. I analyzed the situation quickly in my mind, being engaged to my nemesis versus being abandoned at my own engagement party. After thinking it over, the former seemed to have more benefits. Christian came from a wealthy family, and the advantages of marrying him far outweighed those of marrying Armin. Perhaps my gaze was too intense, because Christian shuddered slightly. What's with that look? I didn't speak, just stared at him without breaking eye contact. Next, let's welcome today's engagement couple, Miss Patricia and Armin. Before the host could finish his sentence, the assistant interrupted, handing him a new script. Sorry, it's not Armin, it's Mr. Christian. I linked arms with Christian and walked onto the stage, causing a stir in the crowd. But no matter what they said, my engagement to Christian was a done deal. Something's wrong here. It should be Armin, not Christian. How could Patricia be with someone like him? Patricia, stop messing around. Where's Armin? Why didn't he come out with you? The voice came from Armin's aunt, the woman who had always looked down on me. She thought I was embarrassing the family by running their company and being in the public eye. She had heard about the engagement and had come to lecture me, telling me to quit my job and focus on having children after marriage. If it hadn't been for Armin, I would have never tolerated her for this long. What's Armin doing? Shouldn't his family know better than me? After all, I'm just an outsider. Armin's aunt looked offended, her face darkening. What do you mean by that? I'm your elder. How can you speak to me like this? Christian narrowed his eyes, visibly irritated. What makes you my elder? She's marrying me, not you. Are you my elder now? His words made Armin's aunt's face turn pale. Christian's family status is higher than Armin's. It's worth noting that most of Christian's elders have already passed away. Even if she had 100 times the courage, she wouldn't dare act like Christian's elder. She didn't dare to direct her anger at Christian, so she took it out on me instead. Armin is your man, don't you even have the ability to keep him in check? I raised an eyebrow, unfazed. He's neither engaged nor married to me. How is he my man? The one standing beside me today, the one I'm engaged to, is my man. I deliberately leaned closer into Christian's embrace, and his arm naturally wrapped around my waist. Smart enough to know who your man is. Good, not stupid. His words unmistakably confirmed his status as my fiancé. There was no trace of the reluctance he had shown in the dressing room earlier. This engagement ceremony, with its last-minute change of male lead, became the hot topic of every headline. Within 2 days, the news had spread like wildfire. I received a call from Armin 3 days after my engagement to Christian. Clearly, he had seen the news online and decided to call me. The first thing he did was bombard me with accusations. What are you doing? Throwing a tantrum like a child and finding someone else to replace me at our engagement? Do you even realize that our engagement involves both our families' companies? Can't you at least throw a fit at the right time? Changing the engagement partner last minute, do you know how much my company's stock dropped because of this? How can you be so unreasonable? Armin's call didn't include any explanation of where he had been or what he had done over the past 3 days, nor did he show any concern for how I had managed to keep everything under control during the engagement ceremony. He thought I had gotten engaged to someone else out of spite. As if I were just being childish. Armin, I asked you before the engagement ceremony started. You were the one who chose Sarah over us. Don't you think it's ridiculous for you to come and question me now? He paused, silent for a moment. Patricia, it was an emergency that day. Couldn't you have just postponed the engagement? He made it sound so simple. So many people had taken time out of their busy schedules to attend the engagement. Did his family even have the clout to ask them to make time for another one? Not to mention his family's lack of influence, mine didn't have that kind of pull either. Patricia, can't you stop being so stubborn? We've been together for so long, and you really need to work on that temper of yours. Let's just let this one go. Go explain things to Mr. Christian and don't offend him. We'll hold another engagement ceremony once Sarah recovers. I'll make sure it's even grander, okay? Listening to Armin's words, I suddenly felt incredibly relieved that I hadn't gone through with the engagement. Otherwise, who knows how much my company would have suffered under his leadership. Armin, the smartest thing your father ever did was have so many illegitimate children. With your intelligence, inheriting the company would have been a stretch. What do you mean by that? Christian took the phone from behind me. What does it mean? It means you're an idiot. If you don't get it, go back to elementary school. Is Sarah your mother or your sister? What does her losing a child have to do with you? Still, thanks for caring so much about her. Otherwise, I might have missed out on my fiancé. Thanks, you're oddly kind, just not very bright. After his sarcastic remarks, Christian hung up the phone for me. He tossed the phone back into my lap and eyed me suspiciously. You're not still hung up on him, are you? I glared at him. I know a good neurologist if you need a referral. Funny, I know a good ophthalmologist too. I rolled my eyes in annoyance. So what if we're engaged? Being with Christian still feels like we're rivals, just like before. Life after getting engaged to Christian turned out to be more interesting than I expected. I moved into his villa. Every morning, we'd part ways, only to run into each other in business meetings later, exchanging a few sharp words. At night, back at the villa, Christian would probe me with an attitude I couldn't quite decipher. Are you really not going to go for the project in the Eastern District? This was the third time Christian had asked me that tonight. Each time, his face seemed to scream, come on, beg me. I looked up from my laptop, leaning back on the sofa. What? Asking me so many times, are you planning to hand the project over to me? The Eastern District was a piece of undeveloped land. The government planned to develop the area, and once it took off, it would be a gold mine. Recently, the competition for that land had been fierce, but Christian had always held the upper hand. I knew my family's company wasn't qualified to compete with the others, so I casually submitted a low bid and focused on other collaborations instead. Christian stiffened, his lips twitching unnaturally. What are you thinking? How could I let you make all the money alone? If you're interested in the Eastern District project, we could collaborate. I raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. This wasn't the first time Christian had proposed a collaboration. A few times before, I'd been completely exploited by him. That's how we ended up as rivals in the first place. Go on, how are you planning to screw me over this time? Business is business. How can you call it screwing over? Even though I knew Christian might try to take advantage of me, I still agreed to collaborate. Aside from him exploiting me, there weren't any other downsides to working with him. He just didn't like me, not the money. The next day at the office, Christian sent over the contract documents. Miss Patricia, these are the documents Mr. Christian drafted himself. He specifically asked me to tell you to review them carefully. I meticulously went through a few pages. Most of the terms were heavily in my favor. Had Christian suddenly grown a conscience? Everything looks fine. I'll sign it. Miss Patricia, Mr. Christian asked me to tell you that he'll pick you up after work tonight. He mentioned you still haven't unblocked his number. The shareholders couldn't help but laugh at that. I couldn't say much to the assistant, so I silently unblocked Christian's number. Shortly after signing the contract for the Eastern District project, my father, who usually showed no interest in the company, called me. Did Mr. Christian really give us the Eastern District project? Yes, is there a problem? I kept my tone cold, with no desire to engage in conversation. Ever since he brought Sarah and her mother home while my mom was ill, my mom had become depressed and passed away within 6 months. Yet he acted as if nothing had happened, happily playing house with Sarah and her mother in the old family estate. Sarah's mother was his first love, and she had secretly had his child. If it weren't for the fact that I was now in charge of the family company, the two of them would have probably married behind my back. I know you still blame me for what happened to your mom, but the doctor said there was no saving her. Tammy and I weren't the ones who caused her death. Hearing the coldness in my voice, my father softened his tone. If you called to talk about this, then we have nothing to discuss. That's not why I called. I just wanted to ask you to arrange a dinner with Mr. Christian so we can express our gratitude. Give me a break. Not everyone has as much free time as you do. I hung up in annoyance and promptly blocked his number. A few days after the project was finalized, my phone kept buzzing with messages from my dad and Armin. For several days, Christian had been acting all moody and sarcastic at home. Your precious Armin is texting you again, he said, his tone dripping with mockery. I was honestly fed up. Right in front of him, I blocked Armin's number. Can you stop giving me that sarcastic look now? I snapped. Christian pouted. Who's being sarcastic? I'm just worried I might be standing in the way of true love. Whatever bond one had with him died the moment he left me for Sarah, I said, taking off my glasses and rubbing the bridge of my nose. I faintly heard Christian mutter, "I'd never leave you." His words caught me off guard, and when I looked at him, he was back to his usual annoying self. I didn't press him further. After the collaboration, the chances of running into Christian skyrocketed. Not only did I see him at the villa, but we also had to review project proposals together in the office. Rumors started spreading at the company that ever since Christian and I got engaged, we weren't at each other's throats anymore. Christian had become noticeably gentler with me. As I watched him lounging on the sofa reviewing the proposal, I couldn't help but feel a bit annoyed. Sure, he looked calm and composed, but the moment he opened his mouth, it was pure torture. "Patricia, I'm thirsty. Get me some coffee." "Patricia, what does this part of the proposal mean? Come over and explain it to me." "Patricia. Patricia. Patricia." Christian called my name what felt like 800 times that morning, driving me up the wall. When I stepped out to the break room for some air, I overheard employees gossiping about Armin. "I just saw Mr. Armin enter Miss Patricia's office. Isn't Mr. Christian in there too? Oh my God, this is going to be a showdown." Mr. Armin looked pretty angry when he came in. Why is he even mad? He's the one who left Miss Patricia. Does he expect her not to move on? Mr. Christian is clearly better looking anyway. But Mr. Armin and Ms. Patricia had so many years together. How can Mr. Christian compare? From their chatter, I gathered that after I blocked Armin, he had come straight to the company to confront me. I hurried back to the office. When I pushed the door open, Armin was standing in the middle of the room, while Christian sat on the sofa, not even bothering to glance at him, treating him like thin air. "Patricia, how could you let Christian into your office to review proposals? There's so much confidential information here. What if he has ulterior motives?" I ignored his question and gave him a once-over. "Shouldn't you be at the hospital with Sarah? What are you doing here?" "I was just looking after Sarah for you. We can always re-engage whenever you want." Before he could finish, Christian let out a mocking laugh. "Do you need the number of a good eye doctor, Patricia?" I shot him an annoyed look. "I'm not blind." "Not blind?" Could have fooled me. Otherwise, how could there be such a huge piece of unrecyclable trash in your office? The unrecyclable trash in question glared at him. "Who are you calling trash? Can't tell? Obviously, I'm talking about you." "I'd never insult my fiancé," Christian said, standing up and walking over to me. He wrapped an arm around my waist, right in front of Armin. "Was I too rough with you last night? Is that why you're letting this garbage ruin my day today?" His hand rested lightly on my waist, and his words were deliberately suggestive. Armin's face turned dark instantly. "You slept with him?" I shrugged, not bothering to correct Christian. "We're engaged. What's the big deal about sharing a bed? Have you no shame? I was just looking after your sister for you, and you're already jumping into another man's arms?" Armin knew full well about the tension between Sarah and me, yet he acted like he was defending her. "Patricia, you've disappointed me. You knew exactly what you were doing when you left me at the engagement party to go to Sarah. You knew what I'd face, but you still chose to abandon me. Armin, if anyone should be disappointed, it's me. It took me over 20 years to see who you really are. I only see Sarah as a sister. How many times do I have to say it? Just a sister." As soon as the words left his mouth, there was a thud outside the door, followed by gasps from the employees. "Isn't that Miss Patricia's half-sister, Sarah? Why did she faint here? Oh my God, call an ambulance. Don't let her die in our office." Hearing Sarah's name, Armin didn't even glance at me before rushing out. I watched his retreating figure, my thoughts a tangled mess. A sister? More like a mistress, Christian whispered in my ear, his warm breath tickling me. I shrank away uncomfortably. "Are you going to move your hand, or do I need to break it for you?" My warning didn't faze him. Instead, he started getting even more handsy. "Is it illegal to touch my own fiancé? If you don't like it, go touch your fiancé. That way, we're even." Christian's whole demeanor screamed, "Come touch me." I reached for his hand and squeezed it hard. If you don't want this hand, I'll take care of it for you. Christian winced and let go. Armin had rushed Sarah to the hospital that morning, but by the afternoon, he was back at the company looking for me. Unfortunately, I was out with Christian inspecting a plot of land in the Eastern District. Unable to reach me, since I'd blocked him, Armin resorted to waiting outside my old apartment. But I had already moved in with Christian. News of Sarah fainting at the company spread like wildfire online, and soon, reporters were camped outside the building, waiting to ambush me. Miss Patricia, is it true that you've been mistreating your half-sister, Sarah? Is there really no family bond in wealthy families? Is Sarah's poor health related to you? Was Mr. Armin's absence from the engagement party also connected to Sarah? Miss Patricia, why aren't you responding? Are the rumors true that Sarah indirectly caused your mother's death, and that you've been harboring resentment, even stealing her boyfriend as revenge? The reporter's questions grew more and more invasive, touching on matters that had never been made public. My fists clenched at my sides as the security and my assistant tried to maintain order. Sarah really couldn't keep her composure. Before she could come to me, I decided to meet her myself. She looked much better than the last few times I'd seen her, her face no longer pale and sickly. Sister, what did you want to talk about today? Sarah asked, her eyes downcast, looking fragile and delicate. Sitting across from her, even without saying a word, I gave off the impression that I was bullying her. It's just the two of us here. Why beat around the bush? Tell me what you want, and maybe I'll be in a good enough mood to give it to you. That way, you won't have to go through all this trouble online. Sarah looked up, her eyes locking onto mine. What are you talking about? I don't understand. I smiled and pulled out a folder of evidence from my bag, proof that she had been working with tabloids and manipulating public opinion to attack me. Seeing the evidence, Sarah's composure cracked. Who knows if you forged this to frame me? I don't want much. Just give me 3% of the company's shares and let Dad marry my mom. Then everything will be resolved. I played with my earring casually. You've got some nerve. Should I call in the witnesses to confront you directly? 3% of the company is worth a fortune. Do you realize what you're doing? This is extortion. As she stared at me in disbelief, I called the police. Extortion would land her in jail for a few years. I had already prepared the witnesses, evidence, and even a recording of our entire conversation. Sarah and I were both taken to the police station, where she was held on charges of extortion. By the time Armin arrived, I had just finished giving my statement. Sarah, don't worry. I'll get you out of here. You're not well, and if anything happens to you, I'd be heartbroken. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, as I listened to Armin comfort Sarah. How touching. But you won't be able to get her out. She's been spreading false rumors, defaming me, and even attempted extortion. With all those charges, she's looking at least 3 years in prison. At my words, Sarah's face paled, and tears welled up in her eyes. Armin, I was just playing around with my sister. I didn't extort her. I don't know where she got that evidence, but if staying in prison for a few years will make her feel better, then I'm willing. Sarah spoke with such sincerity that Armin's heart ached for her. He turned to me and grabbed my hand. It was just a joke. Did you really have to take it this far? She's not well. What if something happens to her in prison? I slapped his hand away and then slapped his face. Armin's head snapped to the side, and it took him a moment to recover. Am I some kind of saint? She's been spreading lies online and tried to extort me. Are you blind? If you want to get her out, go ahead. But given your recent performance at the company, I doubt your father will lift a finger to help you. Don't fight over me. I'll stay here until Patricia calms down. It's fine, Sarah said, her face pale as she coughed lightly. Armin immediately rushed to her side. Wait for me. I'll get you out of here. I might consider dropping the charges if you hand over the B-City project to me. Before Armin could respond, Sarah frowned. You know how important that project is to Armin's standing in the company. How can you ask for that? There are other projects. Right now, the most important thing is getting you out, Armin said. The two of them put on a dramatic performance of undying love right in front of me. I had no interest in watching their act. I'm a businesswoman. My decisions are based on my interests. So, are you going to save her or not? After a long moment of hesitation, Armin finally agreed to hand over the project. He contacted his assistant to draft a contract and bring it over. Once the contract was signed, I withdrew the lawsuit and sent the evidence to my assistant to post online, clearing my name. Even with the deal, I couldn't let the rumors tarnish my reputation. As I walked out of the police station, I saw Christian hurrying toward me. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his face filled with concern. He grabbed my hands, inspecting them carefully, and only relaxed when he saw I was unharmed. I raised an eyebrow at him. "Why so worried? Do you have feelings for me?" "I mean, I am pretty irresistible." Christian bit his lip, the worry in his eyes impossible to hide. He avoided my gaze. "Just glad you're okay. Leave these kinds of things to me next time. Who knows if Sarah's as crazy as Armin? What if she hurts you?" I opened my mouth to respond, but he cut me off, launching into a lecture. By the end of it, I found myself nodding along. All right. I'll listen to you from now on, okay? I'll be more careful. I've been dealing with her for years. I know what she's capable of." Christian couldn't argue with that, so he just gave me a disapproving look. "I'll discuss things with you before acting next time. I didn't realize you were so high maintenance." Christian stayed silent, still upset, and didn't let me hold his hand. After that incident, Sarah became much more subdued. With the loss of the B-City project, Armin lost his chance to join the family company, which was now managed by his illegitimate siblings. He had more time to spend by Sarah's side. Meanwhile, I was juggling two major projects at the same time, leaving me no room to care about their affairs. Christian had been driving me to and from work every day. Rumors at the company were swirling about how our relationship was getting better. In reality, Christian and I had already registered our marriage. Don't ask why, let's just say I had a momentary lapse in judgment. But since marriage was inevitable, I figured I might as well marry someone who maximized my interests. Christian was that person. However, after we got married, Christian changed quite a bit. He stopped bickering with me and started calling me baby all the time, which gave me goosebumps. I thought he had found some new way to annoy me. That is, until a call from the housekeeper shattered my assumptions. "Madam, I found a pink diary under the bed while cleaning. Is it yours? Should I put it in the study?" I thought hard but couldn't recall owning a pink diary. I'm not the type to keep a diary. Since it was just Christian and me living there, it had to be his. I never would have guessed Christian kept a diary. Thinking back to how he had kissed me senseless in the car that morning before letting me out, I felt a surge of irritation. "Madam? Madam?" The housekeeper's voice snapped me out of my thoughts. "Just leave it on the nightstand," I said. I left work an hour early and returned to the villa Christian and I shared. Our marriage hadn't been publicly announced, only his family knew about it. The housekeeper had already left, and when I went upstairs to the bedroom, I saw the diary on the nightstand. It was indeed pink, with a vintage design on the cover, nothing like something Christian would use. I swear I didn't mean to read it, but somehow the diary opened itself to the first page, where I saw my name. I expected it to be a diary full of Christian's complaints about me, but instead, it was a chronicle of his secret crush on me. After reading a few pages, I slammed it shut. Can you imagine the shock of realizing your so-called nemesis has actually been secretly in love with you all along? Holding the diary, my mind raced. When did Christian and I become enemies? Back then, I wasn't the sharp-tongued woman I am now, I was a gentle young girl. After my mother's death, my father tried to wrestle control of the company from me, and I fought tooth and nail to keep it. The first project I secured was with Christian. Back then, Christian loved to stir up trouble and had a sharp tongue. The 3 months we worked together were some of the most unpleasant memories I had. But now, looking back, I realized Christian had taught me a lot. What I saw as his sarcasm was actually his way of showing concern. His provocations were his way of teaching me how to navigate the business world. But at the time, I only felt like he was targeting me. Over time, I labeled him as my nemesis and couldn't stand the sight of him. That fool thought he had caught my attention and even wrote in his diary about how happy he was for a few days. When he realized I only saw him as an enemy, he vented his frustration in the diary, calling me a blockhead who couldn't sense his feelings. The image of Christian, sitting at his desk in the middle of the night, writing in his diary with a pout, popped into my head. It was kind of funny, wasn't it? When Christian came home, I was sitting on the couch with my head down. He couldn't see my expression but sensed something was off. "Why didn't you wait for me to pick you up today?" I looked up at him without saying a word. Christian started to panic. "Was it because I kissed you too hard this morning? Do you want to kiss me back? Don't just stay silent." Christian stood in front of me like a puppy, looking both scared and... I pulled out the diary he had hidden under the bed. "The housekeeper found this while cleaning today. Do you want to explain, or should I read it out loud?" Christian's face flashed with panic, and his voice was hoarse. "You know now? But I'm not agreeing to a divorce. We're not getting divorced." He grabbed my hand, his eyes red, but his words were utterly childish. I lightly kicked him. "Who said anything about divorce? You only got engaged to me because Armin left you. You married me for the project. And after we got married, you were so distant. I thought you never liked me." He sounded defeated. "You don't know how happy I was when you dragged me onto the stage at the engagement party. But then I realized you only chose me because you couldn't find anyone else." I was both happy and angry. Happy because you chose me, but angry because it was only after Armin left that you turned to me. I know you hate me, and I was afraid this diary would become a burden to you, that you'd distance yourself because of it. Patricia, look at me. I love you more than Armin ever did." The CEO, usually so composed, was now kneeling before me, holding my hand to his face, begging me to love him. "We're not getting divorced," I said, leaning forward to kiss his forehead. "At first, I did marry you because it was beneficial. I admit I had some biases against you. But over time, I've seen how good you are to me. I'm not blind, I can see your love. Be more confident. Maybe I've already fallen for you." After we confessed our feelings, our relationship heated up quickly. The downside was that I was often late to work, nursing a sore back. "Christian. You're not sleeping in the bedroom tonight." "Fine, we'll sleep in the guest room then." After our relationship deepened, Christian and I were practically inseparable. "Miss Patricia, there's a meeting soon. You and Mr. Christian should wrap things up quickly." My assistant now reported things without even entering the room, afraid of seeing something she shouldn't. I was in Christian's arms, my eyes red from his kisses, as I pounded his chest. "Get off me. I have a meeting." Christian's suit was wrinkled from our earlier antics. He leaned back on the couch, his eyes red, looking like he'd been thoroughly wronged. "You're abandoning me after getting what you wanted." I ignored his complaints and straightened my dress, ready to leave without a second thought. "After the meeting, you owe me," Christian said, pulling me back. "Fine, wait here like a good boy." As I walked out of the office, I felt a wave of nausea. I rushed to the restroom but couldn't throw up. I didn't think much of it. When I arrived at the meeting, the planning team was already there. They started their presentation as soon as I sat down. The proposal itself was fine, but just as I was about to speak, another wave of nausea hit me. I raised my hand to stop the meeting, stood up, and then everything went black. When I woke up, I saw Christian's dazed eyes. "Are you pregnant?" He sat beside me, looking stunned, his eyes constantly darting to my stomach. Pregnant? Honestly, I wasn't ready to be a mother. But the thought of a little life growing inside me felt strangely wonderful. "If you're not ready, we can let it go," Christian said, holding my hand sincerely. I touched my stomach. "Let's see. I haven't decided yet." After Christian found out about the pregnancy, he took over the management of both companies and stayed by my side at the hospital. Every meal was carefully selected by him, and he personally handled everything related to me. As I watched Christian working nearby, I touched my still flat stomach. Maybe Christian would make a good father. This tender moment was interrupted by an unwelcome visitor, Armin. I hadn't seen Armin in a long time. After losing the B-City project, his father had kicked him out of the family company and given him a small business to manage. Armin's hair was disheveled, as if he had rushed over. When he saw me in the hospital bed and Christian working nearby, he was furious. "Patricia, why didn't you tell me you were in the hospital?" Christian walked over, poured me a glass of water, and said, "Drink some water. You'll need your voice to yell at him later." I smiled and took the water. Armin, ignored, grew even angrier. Is she your girlfriend? Why are you so concerned? Christian calmly showed off his wedding ring. I've been looking for a chance to show this off. She's not my girlfriend, she's my legally wedded wife. And the child she's carrying is mine. Christian looked as proud as a peacock. Armin was stunned. You married him? I leaned into Christian's arms. Isn't it normal to marry your fiancé? Armin's eyes turned red. No. I'm your fiancé. How could you marry him? We never broke up. You can't marry him. Christian fed me a grape. You broke up with Patricia when you left her for Sarah. Now she's my wife. Thanks for giving me the chance. Christian knew exactly how to hurt him. Shut up. Armin lunged at Christian, but before he could land a punch, bodyguards rushed in and restrained him. Christian didn't even flinch. No one waits forever, Armin. He's lying, right? You can't really be married to him. You love me, don't you? Let's get married now, okay? Patricia, Patricia. His constant whining gave me a headache. I grabbed a medical record and threw it at him. Open your eyes and read what's on this. If you're blind, there's an eye doctor here who can help you. The record hit his forehead, leaving a red mark. I don't believe it. I don't believe you'd be so heartless. How could you move on so quickly? It hasn't been that long. It's been a year since the engagement. Isn't it normal for me to be married and pregnant? Armin stared at me in disbelief, muttering, a year? How? How has it been a year? I rubbed my temples, too tired to deal with him, and had the bodyguards throw him out. After Armin found out about my marriage and pregnancy, he started lurking outside the hospital every day. Even when the bodyguards chased him away, he refused to leave. Worried that Armin might do something drastic, Christian arranged for me to be discharged that very night. Even after I left the hospital, Armin kept trying to see me. One day, as I was sunbathing in the yard, I felt someone's gaze on me. Turning, I saw a haggard Armin standing outside the fence. Can we talk? He stood there, looking at me through the vines. I shook my head. There was nothing left to say. Seeing my refusal, Armin didn't push further. He just stood there, watching me with a mix of regret and something else I couldn't quite place. After that, I'd occasionally see Armin lingering outside the fence. Christian would always get jealous and kiss me in the yard. He's so annoying, Christian grumbled. I pinched his cheeks. You're going to be a dad, and you're still this childish? It's not childish. I just don't want him coveting you. A blind man like him doesn't deserve you. He'll stop coming once he figures things out. If you interfere, he'll only become more obsessed and keep showing up. Christian listened to me and stopped paying attention to Armin. One day, while Armin was waiting outside, I saw Sarah, whom I hadn't seen in a long time. She looked well, her cheeks rosy. Armin, even if you wait here forever, she won't look back at you. Why can't you turn around and see me? You said I was more important before. What are you doing now? Since you chose me, there's no chance for you and Patricia. Does she know that all those times you were busy with work, you were actually with me? Do you think she'd still want you? Stop clinging to the past. Let's get married, okay? Just turn around and look at me. Even Sarah, usually so proud, was reduced to begging in front of the man she loved. But Armin's eyes turned red. No, Patricia loved me the most. She wouldn't be so heartless. Sarah stumbled as he pushed her away. I'm not lying. You took advantage of Patricia's love, knowing she'd never leave you. You knew what she'd face when you left her at the engagement party, but you still chose me. Armin, it's over between you two. Armin, enraged, grabbed Sarah by the throat. Her face turned purple as she struggled. If it weren't for a passerby calling the police, she might have died. Both of them were taken to the station, where Sarah accused Armin of attempted murder, determined to ruin him. But she forgot that Armin had his family's protection. They pulled some strings and sent him abroad. Sarah, with no income, was left to rely on my father. While she wasn't openly punished, she was secretly manipulated into drug abuse, effectively ruining her life. When I heard about this, I wasn't surprised. I always knew about Sarah's obsessive love. Her betrayal in the police station was her way of saying, if you don't love me, then die. But Armin had his family's protection, and she couldn't destroy him. I wouldn't let Sarah die easily either, they deserved each other. Christian hugged me from behind. What are you thinking about? I didn't move, just smiled as I looked out the window. Thinking about you. The end.